Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Emma. Welcome back if you've been here before. Today we're going to go over all of the books that I read this summer. There's some mysteries, there's some YA, there's some fantasy, there's a classic thrown in there for a little bit of spice. And I am extra excited for this wrap-up video because it means that August is almost over, which means that fall is about to begin. So if you can't tell by my too cute to spook black cat mug, I am very excited for fall and I am very excited to start diving into all of those awesome books. But before I can do that, I need to go over all of the books that I read over the past couple of months. So without further ado, let's get started. So quite a few of the books on this list this time were actually read on my Kindle or from the library, which I'm kind of proud about because it means that I didn't spend so much money on books this summer. Or maybe I did and I still just didn't read the ones that I actually spent money on, but that's a topic for another day. But anyways, the first book that I read this summer is Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. The plot of this one revolves around Amelia and Adam. They are married, but their marriage is really on the rocks. Adam also has facial blindness, so he can't recognize faces. He has to recognize people through different mechanisms, I suppose. So Amelia, out of the blue, suddenly at work, wins a weekend getaway to a renovated church in the middle of Scotland in the middle of winter, because that doesn't sound sketchy at all in the slightest, right? Perfectly normal. She thinks that it's going to be the opportunity to get their marriage back on track, but would this really be a mystery thriller if someone didn't have other plans for this? So once Adam and Amelia arrive at their only entirely creepy destination, things start to get a bit weird because who could see that coming? And the story moves on from there. I remember really liking this book at the time, and I feel like the further away I get from actually reading it, the more I like it. Because the twist and the atmosphere and stuff have really just stuck with me, which is one of the hallmarks of a book that really kind of hits home for me, is if I continue to think about it for another month or two or however long my brain decides to hold on to that information. I mean, like I said, it takes place during a blizzard in the middle of Scotland. They're really isolated where they are. The setting is impeccable. The twists were so good, and I mean, obviously highly recommend this one by the way that I've been talking about it. It is really a perfect one for fall or winter, especially with the whole scenery thing, so I would maybe recommend reading it there instead of when I did in the middle of July, because why not, I guess. This one is really, really great. Loved it. 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. This one was really popular over the summer. It features Marcellus, a sentient octopus, Tova, who is a woman in her 70s who cleans the aquarium where Marcellus resides, and Cameron, who's like a dude in his 30s who's really having a tough time getting his life together in any sense of the word. Tova's husband has passed away and her son Eric had gone missing when he was only about 18 years old, I think, so there are quite a few conversations revolving around family, community, grief, the whole gambit. Slowly, Marcellus and Tova find their own way of communicating, which is honestly one of my favorite parts of the book. This book switches between multiple points of view, which is really something that I don't like usually, but because one of the viewpoints is literally a sentient octopus, it works. It works. It gets a lot of brownie points for that. I really wanted to love this one, and I know that a lot of people have. For me, I really got hung up on the fact that Cameron just seemed to have literally 0 redeeming qualities pretty much throughout the entire thing, so I found myself having a really hard time caring if things went well for him while also feeling like everyone around him could have done better, which isn't necessarily how you want to feel about one of your main characters. So for that reason, this one gets a bit of a lower rating. Cameron I give about 2 stars, but because, again, one of the main characters is a literal octopus, it gets quite a few bonus points. 4 out of 5 stars. After that, I took it all the way back to my dramatic young adult reading roots with If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. In this one, there's Autumn and Finney, who grew up being best friends. Their moms are best friends, but as they've gotten older and approached high school, they start to grow apart. As they create their new friend groups and you see them go through high school, you see how the dynamics of their relationship change as well as their relationships with others change. I really enjoyed this book. I could see how someone would say that the writing in this book is kind of juvenile, but I feel like since all of the characters are just kind of dumb teenagers, like it really does sound like the inner thought process and logic of a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old. And so thinking of it that way, I feel like this book actually does a pretty genuine portrayal of everything that's going on in a teenager's mind. So I really appreciated that. On top of that, the emotional punch that it really packs that I kind of knew was going to happen, but I didn't really fully expect was just chef's kiss. I loved it. It had all of the drama, it had some romance, it was honestly just a really fast and fun read. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it. 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Terms and Conditions by Laura Asher. This is the second book in the Dreamland Billionaire series. I read Fine Print last year and I remember liking it. I thought that Rowan and Zara were good together. This one I did not love, unfortunately. So to give you a quick little synopsis on what this book is about, Declan is the aspiring CEO of Dreamland, but before he can become CEO and get his inheritance from his grandfather, he first has to get married and have a kid, which seems like kind of a weird thing for a grandfather to be so invested about, but I digress. Iris is Declan's assistant and she agrees to marry him after his fake marriage to somebody else falls through. So that's how they end up together. It's sort of a forced proximity, marriage of convenience vibe with this one. Iris's character was okay, but Declan's character is where it really lost me because I love a good grumpy sunshine, like, you know, the two battling personalities finally kind of completing each other in a way. But with this one, they made Declan such a robotic, stick-in-the-mud, cold jerk of a character that I had a hard time hearing about him, and it really just felt like a caricature more than an actual person. So it made the whole love story just feel kind of fake to me, so I really didn't love this one. 3 out of 5 stars. Okay, so next one on the list is the first one that I actually have a physical copy of. That is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. This one is really pretty different from her other novels in the sense that she's basically making fun of the genre that she writes in for a lot of the book. So this one centers around the story of Catherine, who Austen repeatedly points out is not very pretty, not very intelligent, not really talented, and not really accomplished in anything. But she gets a really cool opportunity when some neighbors invite her to stay with them in Bath for a couple of months. So she finally gets to enter into high society for the first time and finds herself around a whole lot of new people. I don't want to say too much about this one other than that, because if you plan on reading this one, it's really fun to go in blind and just kind of let the story take you where it takes you. But to give you a general idea of the theme, it really makes fun of the Romanticism and Gothic movements in literature. Jane Eyre wasn't written yet when this was written, but it kind of feels like it's like basically a satire of just that entire genre of overly spooky, overly dramatic books. And so for that kind of tongue-in-cheek writing, I absolutely loved it. It's a great portrait of how that era saw its own writing, which is really cool. Where I didn't love this one as much is the love story just really kind of fell flat. You get to see some interactions, but there's like no real build-up of the romance. I don't know, it's hard to explain. So for that one, it fell flat for me. But if you're wanting just like a little short introduction to Austen that's actually pretty hilarious, then Northanger Abbey would be an awesome option for you. The next book that I read was Lisa Jewell, None of This Is True. This is her newest novel. I've never read Lisa Jewell before, so I was really happy to kind of try out a new author and see where it would go. I talked a lot about the synopsis in my fall TBR video, but to give you a super quick rundown, basically 2 women meet, one of them does a podcast, the other one thinks that she would be a really good subject for the podcast. They start to talk about the podcast. Woman A realizes that woman B's life is totally cray-cray, and chaos ensues. I was super on board with this book for the first, like, 40%. Like, I physically couldn't stop reading this one, and the only thing that got me to put it down was the responsibility of a full-time job, kind of like page-turner. So if that gives you an idea, it was a really fast read, and I wanted to see where it was going, because it was slightly bonkers. This book has some pretty dark themes, but I feel like it doesn't dive into them deeply enough to really be truly creepy, if that makes sense. Like, I've read like Gillian Flynn and some of those where it's like you really feel kind of actually skeeved out by some of the things that are happening. And don't get me wrong, like there are some really creepy themes happening in here, but the way that she approaches them just doesn't feel as skeevy as it could, which for like a mystery kind of is the goal, at least in my mind. I don't know. Maybe that's just like a weird thing for me. I actually don't even like Gillian Flynn that much, so I'm not sure why I'm trying to compare it to it, but whatever. This one, unfortunately for me, was super easy to predict, like way too early on, so it was a really fast read and I wanted to see how things resolved, but you kind of knew what happened pretty early. Like, it kind of gave a few too many hints. And then I feel like when everything settled, the characters were like way too chill about it, if that makes sense. Like, there were not enough repercussions. Everyone was just too low-key about all of the craziness that was happening. So that took some of the oomph out of the story for me. Even though it had some twists, it just didn't have the same tension that books like Rock, Paper, Scissors had. So even though I really wanted to keep reading this one and I couldn't put it down, it still kind of fell flat for me. 3 out of 5 stars. And now we are on to the last book that I read this summer, and that's Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I love this book. Like, I really, really, truly love it. First of all, how dare this book make me feel all of those things that I was not prepared to feel. I was going into this thinking that it was a YA romance fantasy, romantasy, if you will, and it is that, but also, oh my god, my emotions. Wow, I really was not expecting that kind of punch from this book, and it delivered tenfold. So again, I talked about this one in my fall TBR, but in case you missed that one, this one follows the story of Iris and Roman, who are both reporters for the Gazette in Oath, which is in the like eastern part of whatever land this is in. And in the West, there's a really intense war raging between two gods. And Iris's brother, Forrest, at the very beginning of the book, is leaving to go fight in this war. So she's kind of on her own in the world. And where they live in Oath, nobody is really taking the war very seriously yet. I really don't want to say too much more about where the story for this one goes because I feel like it is the perfect book to just totally get swept away in. So I want to let you do that because I went in pretty blind. I feel like I got so much out of it just letting the book take me where it wanted to take me, if you will. But I truly cannot stress to you enough how much I loved this book. All right. The side characters, the setting, the mythology, the tension, the romance, the magic. I mean, there's so much happening. It's all amazing. It blends together seamlessly. I want to continue to live in this world, and the fact that I have to wait until December 26th to get the sequel physically pains me. So thank you for that, Rebecca Ross, but also thank you for writing what is probably going to be one of my favorite books this entire year. So 8 out of 5 stars. Love it. Love it so much. And with that, that is all for today. Thank you so much for coming along on this journey with me while I revisited all of the books that I read this summer. And once again, I am so excited to dive into all of the fall reading. I've already knocked off a couple of books from my fall TBR, so I might have to do another TBR video. I kind of want to do one of those TBR jar prompt videos, so if you want to see one of those, let me know down below. But also let me know what you're reading, what your favorite book was this summer, because I always love a good recommendation. And with that, I hope you have a happy and wonderful week, and I will see you next time.